The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I filed another invoice into the cabinet, my fingers moving through the familiar motions while my mind wandered elsewhere. 4 years I'd worked at Bianchi Imports, 4 years of maintaining the careful boundary between professional courtesy and the quiet intensity in Massimo Bianchi's eyes whenever they found mine across the office. I knew what he was. Everyone in the city whispered about it, though never loudly enough for him to hear. The import business was legitimate, profitable even, but the shadows that moved through his world were darker than shipping manifests and customs declarations. I'd chosen not to look too closely, chosen to focus on the work itself, on the steady paycheck that kept my small apartment and my simple life intact. My phone buzzed against the desk. Henrique. Again. "Where are you?" The text demanded. No greeting, no warmth. "At work," I typed back, my stomach tightening with the familiar anxiety that had become my constant companion over the past 6 months. Same as I told you this morning. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I could picture him in his studio apartment, surrounded by camera equipment he rarely used anymore. His jealousy eating away at the talented photographer I'd fallen for 3 years ago. "You smiled at Marcos today. I saw you." Ice flooded my veins. Marcos was a colleague, happily married with 2 children. We'd exchanged pleasantries about his daughter's birthday party. Nothing more. But Enrique saw threats everywhere now, imagined intimacies in every casual interaction. "He was telling me about his daughter's birthday," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, unthreatening. "That's all." "Don't lie to me, Serena." I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly. This was getting worse. The accusations, the constant monitoring, the way he'd insisted on having my location sharing enabled on my phone for safety. The way he'd gradually isolated me from friends, from family, until my world had shrunk to just work and him. "Everything all right, Serena?" I looked up to find Massimo standing in the doorway of his office, his dark eyes assessing me with that quiet intensity that had always made my pulse quicken, despite my determined loyalty to Henrique. He wore his usual tailored charcoal suit, the top button of his white shirt undone, sleeves rolled to his elbows in a way that suggested he'd been working late. "Fine, Mr. Bianchi," I said automatically, sliding my phone face down on the desk. "Just finishing up the month-end reconciliations." He didn't move, didn't press, but something in his expression told me he saw more than I wanted him to. Massimo Bianchi had built an empire by reading people, by understanding what they didn't say as much as what they did. "It's past 7, he observed quietly. "You should go home. The reconciliations can wait until morning." "I'm almost done," I insisted, needing the buffer of work between me and the inevitable confrontation waiting at home. "Just a few more invoices." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Serena." The way he said my name, with that slight Italian accent softening the consonants, had always done something to me that I refused to examine too closely. "Go home. That's not a suggestion." I nodded, gathering my things with hands that wouldn't quite steady. My phone buzzed again. And again. Massimo's gaze dropped to the phone, then back to my face. "If you ever need anything," he said, his voice low and careful, "anything at all, you call me, day or night. You understand?" The offer hung in the air between us, weighted with meanings I couldn't afford to acknowledge. I was with Henrique. I was faithful. I had been faithful for 3 years, even as Massimo's quiet presence had become the gravitational center of my working days. "Thank you, Mr. Bianchi," I whispered. "But I'm fine. Really." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides as though restraining himself from action. But he respected my boundaries, as he always had. 4 years of perfect professional distance, of never once crossing the line, even when I'd felt the pull between us like a physical force. "Buonanotte, Serena," he said finally, stepping back into his office. "Good night, Mr. Bianchi." The apartment I shared with Henrique was dark when I arrived, though his car was in the lot. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, my work bag heavy on my shoulder, rehearsing explanations in my head. "Marcos has a wife. We were just talking. You're imagining things." The apartment smelled like stale cigarettes and old takeout. Enrique had promised to quit smoking, had promised a lot of things. I found him in the living room, his camera equipment spread across the coffee table in a way that suggested he'd been sitting there for hours, waiting. "You're late," he said, not looking up from the lens he was cleaning with aggressive, precise movements. "I told you I was finishing the reconciliations," I replied, setting my bag down carefully, measuring the tension in the room the way I'd learned to do. "Mr. Bianchi made me leave at 7. His head snapped up at that. His eyes narrowed. "Mr. Bianchi made you?" "Asked me to," I corrected quickly. "He said the work could wait until morning." Henrique stood, and I saw the beer bottles lined up on the windowsill, 4 empty soldiers standing at attention. My stomach dropped. He was worse when he drank. "How considerate of him," Henrique said, his voice deceptively calm. "Always so concerned about your well-being. Always watching you. I've seen how he looks at you, Serena." "He's my boss," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's all. That's all." He laughed, a harsh sound. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see what's happening?" "Nothing is happening," I insisted. But even as I said it, I felt the lie in my throat. Nothing physical had happened, nothing concrete. But the connection between Massimo and me was real, had been real for years, humming beneath the surface of every professional interaction. Henrique crossed the space between us in 2 strides, his hand closing around my wrist with bruising force. "Don't lie to me." "Henrique, you're hurting me," I said, trying to pull away. His grip tightened, his other hand coming up to grab my other wrist. "You smiled at Marcos today. You stayed late with Massimo. Who else, Serena? Who else are you fucking?" "No one." The denial came out as a half-sob. "Henrique, please, you're hurting me." But he wasn't listening, wasn't seeing me anymore. His jealousy had become its own entity, consuming the man I'd once loved. His fingers dug into my wrists, hard enough that I knew there would be marks, dark blooms of purple and yellow that would take weeks to fade. "You're mine," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "Mine, Serena. Not Massimo's, not Marcos's, not anyone else's. When are you going to understand that?" I tried to twist away, and his hand came up, catching me across the face with enough force to snap my head to the side. The shock of it froze me in place, my cheek burning, my ears ringing. He'd never hit me before. Grabbed me, yes. Squeezed too hard, yes. But never struck me. We stared at each other in the sudden silence, both of us breathing hard. I saw the moment reality crashed back into him, saw the horror bloom in his eyes as he realized what he'd done. "Serena," he whispered, reaching for me. "God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my face, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Don't touch me." "I'm sorry," he repeated, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. When I think about you with someone else, I can't. I love you so much it makes me crazy. But this wasn't love. I finally understood that, standing there with my face throbbing and my wrists already darkening with bruises. This was possession, control, a sick, twisted thing that had slowly replaced the relationship we'd once had. "I need you to leave," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Right now. Serena, please. Get out." The scream tore from my throat. "Get out now, or I'm calling the police." He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his jacket and keys. "This isn't over," he said as he reached the door. "You're upset, but we'll talk tomorrow. You'll see. We're good together, Serena. We belong together." The door slammed, and I was alone. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, my whole body shaking. My phone was in my hand before I'd made a conscious decision to reach for it. Not 911, not my sister who lived 3 states away, not my mother who had warned me about Henrique from the beginning. I scrolled through my contacts with trembling fingers until I found the number I'd never called, the one I'd saved 2 years ago after Massimo had given me his personal cell in case of emergency. My thumb hovered over the call button. It was past 9. He'd be home by now, perhaps having dinner, perhaps entertaining company. What would I even say? "My boyfriend hit me, and somehow you're the only person I could think to call." But the bruises on my wrists were already blooming dark against my skin. My cheek throbbed with each heartbeat, and I was terrified that Henrique would come back, that next time he would do more than grab, more than strike. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. "Serena?" Massimo's voice came through, alert despite the late hour. "What's wrong?" Just hearing my name and his accent, the immediate concern without preamble or pretense, broke something in me. "Can you please get me?" I whispered. I can't. Can you please come get me? Where are you?" His voice had changed, gone hard and focused. "Home. My apartment. But Henrique might come back, and I—" "Lock the door," he interrupted, and I could hear movement in the background, keys jingling. "Lock everything. I'm 10 minutes away. Stay on the phone with me." I stumbled to the door, engaging the deadbolt and chain with shaking hands. "Okay," I breathed. "Okay, it's locked." "What happened, Serena?" The question was gentle but insistent. We fought. About work, about Marcos, about— I couldn't say about you. Couldn't admit that Henrique's jealousy of Massimo had been the undercurrent to every fight for months. He grabbed me. He hit me. I told him to leave, but I don't know if he'll stay away. Silence on the other end, so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from him before, cold and absolutely lethal. "Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. You're not staying there tonight." "Massimo." "Mr. Bianchi can wait until tomorrow," he said, and I could hear the faint smile in his voice despite the steel underneath. "Right now, I'm just Massimo, and you're Serena, and you called me. So pack a bag, Cara. I'm 8 minutes away." I moved through the apartment in a daze, throwing clothes and toiletries into my work bag. My hands were still shaking, adrenaline and fear making everything feel surreal, distant. 7 minutes. 6. 5. A knock at the door made me freeze, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Serena, it's me." Massimo's voice. I fumbled with the locks, pulling the door open to find him standing there in jeans and a black t-shirt, his hair slightly disheveled as though he'd simply grabbed his keys and run. Behind him stood Dante, one of his men, watching the hallway with alert eyes. Massimo's gaze found the bruises on my wrists first, then traveled to my face, to the mark Henrique's hand had left. Something terrible and dark crossed his expression, there and gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. "Let's go," he said quietly, taking my bag from my nerveless fingers. And because I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to, I followed him into the night. Massimo's car was a sleek black Mercedes, the interior smelling of leather and that subtle cologne I'd noticed whenever he passed my desk. Dante drove while Massimo sat in the back with me, maintaining a careful distance even as his eyes catalogued every visible bruise. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the quiet vehicle. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "My home. I have security there, space. You'll have your own suite, complete privacy. Henrique won't be able to get to you." I should have protested, should have insisted on a hotel, a friend's place, anywhere that didn't blur the lines between employer and employee even further. But exhaustion was settling into my bones, and the thought of being alone in some anonymous hotel room, jumping at every sound, made my throat tight with panic. "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you." His jaw tightened, but he only nodded. "We need to document the injuries, for the police report." "I'm not filing a police report," I said automatically. The thought of dealing with officers, of sitting under harsh station lights, recounting every humiliating detail, made me feel sick. Massimo's hand moved as though to reach for mine, then stopped, settling on the seat between us instead. "Serena, he assaulted you. That's not something that just goes away because you ignore it." "I know what he did," I said, anger flickering beneath the fear. "But I also know how these things go. He'll say I'm lying, that I'm trying to ruin him. His family has money, connections. I'll be the scorned girlfriend making false accusations." "You're not lying," Massimo said quietly. "And you're not scorned. You're a woman who was attacked by someone who should have protected you." Tears burned behind my eyes. "It's complicated." "No, Kara. It's actually very simple. He hurt you. That's a crime. The rest is just noise." But it wasn't simple, not when my life was tangled up with Henrique's in 1,000 small ways. The apartment lease was in both our names. We had a joint bank account he'd insisted we open 6 months ago, to make managing bills easier. My car was technically his, a gift he'd given me last year when mine died, though the title was still in his name. Leaving him meant unraveling all of that, meant starting over with nothing but my salary and whatever I could salvage from the wreckage. We pulled through a security gate into an underground parking garage. I'd known Massimo was wealthy, but the building we entered was something else entirely. All marble floors and modern art, a doorman who nodded respectfully as we passed. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. Massimo led me inside, through a living area that seemed to be all windows and clean lines, past a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine, to a guest suite that was larger than the apartment I shared with Henrique. "Bathroom's through there," he said, setting my bag on the bench at the foot of the bed. "Fresh towels in the closet, toiletries under the sink if you need anything. My room is at the other end of the penthouse. Dante will be stationed outside the main door. You're safe here, Serena." I nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in my throat. He moved toward the door, then paused. "I know you don't want to file a police report tonight, but will you let me call my doctor, just to check you over, make sure nothing's broken or seriously damaged? Please." The please undid me. Massimo Bianchi, who commanded an empire, who made grown men nervous with a single look, was asking rather than demanding. "Okay," I agreed softly. 30 minutes later, I sat on the edge of the bed while Dr. Caruso, an elegant woman in her 50s, gently examined my wrists and face. She said little as she worked, her touch professional and careful, but her mouth tightened when she saw the full extent of the bruising. "No fractures," she said finally, clicking off her penlight, "but significant soft tissue damage. These will hurt for several days, worse before they get better. Ice for the first 48 hours, then heat. I'm going to give you something for the pain, and something to help you sleep." "I don't want to be drugged," I protested. Her expression softened. "Not drugged, just helped. Trust me, you'll want to sleep tonight, and your body won't let you without assistance. Too much adrenaline still in your system." She was right, of course. My hands were still trembling, my heart still racing despite being safe behind locked doors and security systems. After Dr. Caruso left, I stood under the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash away the feeling of Henrique's hands on my skin. My wrists throbbed, my face ached, but worse was the knowledge of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. When had the charming photographer I'd fallen for transformed into someone who could hit me? Or had he always been capable of it, and I'd simply refused to see the signs? I emerged from the bathroom in my pajamas to find Massimo in the main living area, standing at the windows with a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand. He'd changed into dark sweatpants and a t-shirt, his feet bare, and I was struck by how different he looked from the controlled businessman I saw every day at the office. "Dr. Caruso said you should take the pain medication," he said without turning. "I will." I hovered in the doorway, uncertain. "Massimo, I don't know how to thank you for this." He finally turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "Don't thank me, Serena. This is what anyone with basic human decency would do. The fact that you think you need to thank me just shows how low Henrique set the bar." I flinched at the name, at the bitter truth in Massimo's words. He noticed. Of course he did. "I'm sorry. That was harsh." "It was honest," I said, moving further into the room. The city glittered below us, thousands of lights against the darkness. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it. The signs were there. I didn't want to look. Massimo was quiet for a long moment. We see what we want to see, especially in the people we care about. That's not weakness, Kara. That's just being human. "When did it start?" I asked, more to myself than to him. "The jealousy, the controlling behavior. Was it always there, or did I miss the moment it changed?" "Does it matter?" His voice was gentle. "The point is that you're out now. You called for help. That takes courage." I laughed, a broken sound. I didn't feel courageous. I felt terrified. I still feel terrified. "Of Henrique?" "Of everything," I admitted. "Of what comes next. Of being alone. Of..." I trailed off, unable to voice the other fear. The one that had nothing to do with Henrique and everything to do with the man standing across the room from me. "You're not alone?" Massimo said firmly. "And you won't be. Whatever you need to rebuild your life, you'll have it. A place to stay for as long as you want. Legal help if you decide to press charges. Security if you feel unsafe. All of it. No strings attached." No strings attached. The words should have been reassuring, but instead they made something in my chest ache. Because part of me wanted there to be strings, wanted to understand what this pull between us meant, wanted to know if he felt it too, or if I'd imagined 4 years of charged glances and careful distance. But I was raw and broken, standing in his penthouse in borrowed pajamas with bruises blooming across my skin. Whatever existed between us would have to wait until I could trust myself again, until I wasn't just running from one man into the arms of another. "Thank you," I said again, because I didn't have other words. "For everything." He nodded, draining the last of his whiskey. "Get some sleep, Serena. Tomorrow will be easier." I retreated to the guest suite, took the medication Dr. Caruso had left, and climbed into bed that was far too large and far too comfortable. Sleep pulled at me despite my racing thoughts, the medication doing its work. My last conscious thought was of Massimo standing at those windows, looking out at his city, and the way he'd said my name like a benediction. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and a moment of disorientation before everything came crashing back. Henrique's hands, the slap. Massimo's voice on the phone, steady and sure. The penthouse, safety, escape. My phone sat on the nightstand, and I reached for it with trepidation. 17 missed calls from Henrique. 23 text messages, progressing from apology to anger to threats. "I know where you are. You think Bianchi can protect you? You think running to him proves you weren't fucking him?" You're making a huge mistake, Serena. Come home and we can work this out. I will find you. You can't hide from me." My hands shook as I read through them, fear coiling in my stomach. But beneath the fear was something else, something harder and colder. Anger. Because how dare he? How dare he hurt me and then act like I was the one who betrayed him? How dare he threaten me for seeking safety? A soft knock at the door made me jump. "Serena? Are you awake?" Massimo's voice, careful, respectful. "Yes," I called out. "Just a minute." I found a robe in the closet, wrapping it around myself before opening the door. Massimo stood there with a tray, coffee, and what looked like breakfast pastries arranged carefully. "I wasn't sure what you'd want," he said, his gaze flickering over my face, assessing the bruising that had darkened overnight. But Elena, my housekeeper, insisted I bring options. The normalcy of the gesture, of breakfast delivered like we were on vacation, rather than hiding from my violent ex-boyfriend, made my throat tight. "Coffee is perfect. Thank you." He set the tray on the small table by the windows. "I need to go into the office for a few hours. Dante will be here, and Elena. You're safe. But I wanted you to know where I'd be." "I should come with you," I said automatically. "I have work. Take the day," he interrupted gently. "Rest. Process. I've already told Marcos you're taking personal time." The mention of Marcos, the colleague whose innocent conversation had triggered Enrique's rage, made me wince. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing specific, just that you needed a few days. Your privacy is yours, Serena. I won't share your story without your permission." I nodded, grateful beyond words. "Enrique has been texting me, calling. He's angry." Massimo's expression darkened. "Block him. Change your number if you need to. I can have it done today." "He'll just find other ways to reach me," I said tiredly. "He knows where I work. He knows my routines." "Then we change your routines," Massimo replied. "Different hours, different route to the office, security escort if necessary. He doesn't get to dictate your life anymore, Serena." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction that Enrique's power over me could be broken, made me want to believe him. But I'd been with Enrique for 3 years, had watched his jealousy grow from endearing attention to suffocating control. I knew he wouldn't just let me go. "I need to get my things from the apartment," I said. "My documents, my clothes, everything. But I can't go alone." "You won't," Massimo assured me. "Give me a list of what you need. Dante and Marco will accompany you. They'll make sure Enrique isn't there first." The efficiency with which he was handling everything should have made me nervous. This was the side of Massimo that ran an empire, that moved pieces across boards I couldn't see, that solved problems with resources and connections that existed in shadows. But instead, I felt only relief. Someone else was taking charge. Someone I trusted. Someone who wouldn't hurt me. "Okay," I agreed. "I'll make a list." After Massimo left for the office, I sat at the table with my coffee, looking out at the city and trying to organize my thoughts. I needed to call my sister, needed to figure out the apartment situation, needed to untangle my finances from Enrique's. That last thought made me pull up my banking app, something I hadn't checked in days. The joint account showed a balance of $347.82, down from the $2 I'd deposited from my last paycheck just a week ago. My heart sank. I clicked through the recent transactions, my stomach churning as I saw withdrawal after withdrawal. Cash advances, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, purchases I hadn't made. Enrique had drained our account. I scrolled further back, looking at the patterns over the past 6 months since we'd opened this joint account. Money went in, my money from my paychecks. Money went out, to places and accounts I didn't control. With shaking hands, I opened my credit report, something I hadn't checked in over a year. 3 new credit cards I didn't remember opening. A personal loan for $15, $0 showing as active. Another loan for $8,000, 60 days past due. My vision blurred. This couldn't be real. I hadn't opened these accounts, hadn't applied for these loans. But the paperwork would say otherwise, wouldn't it? Because Henrique had access to everything. My social security number, my birth date, my address. He'd been living with me, sleeping next to me, probably photographing my documents while I slept. I'd thought the worst he'd done was hit me. I'd been wrong. He'd been systematically destroying my financial life for months, maybe longer. Using my name, my credit, to fund God knows what while I worked 60-hour weeks and trusted him to manage our shared expenses. The pain medication from last night was wearing off, my wrists throbbing, my face aching, but none of that compared to the sick fury rising in my throat as I stared at the evidence of Henrique's betrayal. I grabbed my phone and called Massimo. He answered on the first ring. "Serena, what's wrong?" "He stole from me," I said, my voice shaking with rage rather than fear. "Henrique. He's been using my identity to open accounts, take out loans. I just checked my credit report. There's almost $25,000 in debt I didn't authorize." Silence. Then, in that lethal voice I'd heard last night, "I'm coming back. Don't do anything until I get there." "Massimo. 20 minutes, Cara. Just wait for me." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the financial devastation on my phone screen, understanding finally crystallizing. Henrique hadn't just been controlling. He'd been strategic. The joint account, the car in his name, the gradual isolation from friends and family, all of it designed to make me dependent, to trap me, and I'd let him. I'd signed the papers, opened the accounts, trusted him with access to everything. But that ended now. When Massimo arrived, I was ready. Not broken, not crying, angry, focused. "Show me," he said simply. I walked him through it all, every fraudulent account, every unauthorized loan. He listened without interruption, his expression growing colder with each revelation. "We're calling the police," he said when I finished. "Financial fraud, identity theft. This is prosecutable." "It's my word against his," I protested. "He'll say I authorized everything." "Did you?" Massimo's eyes were hard. "Did you sign these loan applications?" "No, but..." "Then it's fraud, and fraud leaves paper trails. We'll get a lawyer, contest every charge, freeze your credit. We'll destroy him, Serena. Legally, completely." The viciousness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it felt like vindication. "I want to do it myself," I said. "I want to be the one who reports him, who gathers the evidence, who watches him face consequences. Can you help me do that?" Massimo's expression softened infinitesimally. "Yes, Cara. We'll help you fight back. And this time, you won't be alone." For the first time since Henrique's hand had struck my face, I felt something like hope. The police station smelled like stale coffee and bureaucracy. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my statement typed out on the form in front of me, my hand still trembling slightly as I signed my name at the bottom. Detective Sarah Morrison had been patient, professional, asking questions without judgment as I outlined the financial abuse alongside the physical assault. The bruises on my wrists had faded to yellow-green, but the photographs Dr. Caruso had taken that first night were time-stamped and clinical, undeniable evidence. "This will take time to investigate," Detective Morrison warned me, her eyes kind behind steel-rimmed glasses. "Financial fraud cases are complex. We'll need to subpoena bank records, credit applications, establish patterns. Mr. Silva will likely claim you authorized these transactions." "I know," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I didn't. And I'm willing to testify to that." She nodded, gathering the papers into a folder. I'll be in touch as the investigation progresses. In the meantime, you should consider filing for a restraining order. The assault alone justifies it. I'd already done that, with the help of the lawyer Massimo had retained for me. Henrique was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my workplace, or Massimo's building. Not that a piece of paper would stop him if he was truly determined, but it was something. Massimo waited for me in the lobby, his presence drawing curious glances from the officers moving through the station. He wore his business armor today, a dark suit that screamed wealth and power, his expression carefully neutral until his eyes found mine. "How did it go?" he asked quietly as we walked to his car. "She said it will take time. They have to build the case." I buckled my seatbelt, exhaustion settling into my bones. It had been a week since I'd left my apartment, a week of statements and lawyers and slowly piecing together the extent of Henrique's deception. The loan documents had arrived yesterday, obtained through my attorney's requests. My signature on them, or what looked like my signature, though the handwriting analysis would prove it was forged. Applications I'd never seen, references I'd never provided, employment information that had been falsified. Henrique had been thorough. I'd give him that. He'd built an entire financial house of cards using my name as the foundation. "Have you eaten today?" Massimo asked, pulling out of the parking lot. I tried to remember. Coffee this morning, maybe some toast. "Not really." He made a disapproving sound. "We're stopping for lunch. No arguments." The restaurant he chose was quiet, upscale, the kind of place where conversations stayed private and waiters moved like ghosts. We were shown to a corner booth, menus presented with muted efficiency. "You need to eat," Massimo said, studying me across the table. "You've lost weight this week." "I've been stressed," I replied, scanning the menu without really seeing it. "Surprisingly, discovering your boyfriend has been committing identity theft kind of kills the appetite." "Ex-boyfriend," he corrected quietly. "Right. Ex-boyfriend." The word still felt foreign on my tongue. 3 years of my life, gone. Not just gone, revealed as a calculated con. "Serena." Massimo's hand crossed the table, stopping just short of touching mine. "You're allowed to grieve this. Even if he was using you, even if everything was a lie, your feelings were real. That loss is real." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected. "I don't know what I'm grieving. The relationship I thought I had? The person I thought he was? My own stupidity for not seeing it sooner?" "You're not stupid," Massimo said, his voice fierce. "You're trusting. You're loyal. Those are good qualities, Cara. The fact that Henrique exploited them doesn't make them weaknesses." I blinked back the tears, reaching for my water glass instead of his hand, maintaining that careful distance we'd both observed for a week. Living under the same roof, seeing each other at breakfast and dinner, working in the same office, and still maintaining the professional boundaries that had defined us for 4 years. Except it was getting harder. Every kindness from Massimo, every protective gesture, every moment of genuine care made me more aware of what I'd been missing with Henrique, what I'd settled for. "I went back to the apartment yesterday," I said, changing the subject. "With Dante and Marco, like you suggested." His expression sharpened. "Was Henrique there?" "No. But he'd been there." I took a shaky breath. "He'd destroyed my things, Massimo. Everything I'd left behind. My clothes shredded, my books torn apart, photographs burned in the sink. The walls had holes punched in them. It looked like a war zone." Massimo's jaw tightened, his hands flexing on the table. "Did Dante photograph it?" "Everything. The lawyer said it would help with the restraining order, prove his volatile mental state." I laughed bitterly, as if the bruises weren't enough. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "I'm not." I met his eyes. letting him see the anger I'd been carefully banking. I'm glad I saw it. Because now I know exactly who he is. Not the charming photographer who swept me off my feet. Not the boyfriend who claimed to love me so much it made him jealous. The real Henrique, the one who would destroy anything he couldn't control. Something flickered in Massimo's eyes. Approval, maybe. Or recognition of the steel he'd always suspected existed beneath my professional courtesy. The waiter appeared and we ordered, the moment breaking. But the intensity lingered between us, unspoken questions and careful boundaries wearing thinner with each passing day. "I've been looking at apartments," I said once the waiter had gone. "Small studios mostly within my budget. I can't stay at your penthouse forever, Massimo. It's not fair to you." His expression shuddered. "You're not a burden, Serena." I didn't say I was, but I need to rebuild my independence. That means my own space, my own life. You've been incredibly generous, but— "Stay," he interrupted, "at least until the legal matters are resolved. Until Henrique is dealt with, and you know you're safe. The penthouse has more than enough room. You're not inconveniencing anyone." "Massimo, please." The word was quiet, almost vulnerable. "Let me know you're protected, just until this is over." I should have insisted, should have maintained the distance, the propriety. But the thought of being alone in some studio apartment, jumping at every sound, wondering if Henrique had found me. I wasn't that brave yet. "Okay," I agreed softly, "until it's over." Our food arrived, and we ate in companionable silence. It was only when we were leaving, Massimo's hand at the small of my back guiding me through the restaurant, that I noticed the woman watching us from across the room. Mid-30s, expensive suit, eyes sharp with interest. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast when she caught my gaze, her smile knowing. "Who was that?" I asked once we were outside. "Giuliana Rossi," Massimo said, his tone neutral. "She runs operations for the Carlotti family." I stopped walking. The Carlotti family, as in the mob family that supposedly controls the South Side? He sighed. "Yes." "And she was watching us. Why?" "Because you're living with me. Because you left Henrique. Because in this city, everything is currency, and information about me is valuable." He opened the car door for me. "Don't worry about Giuliana. She's not a threat to you." But I did worry, because I was starting to understand the world Massimo inhabited. A world where violence was business and business was war, conducted with smiles and expensive suits. A world where my presence in his life could be interpreted as weakness, as distraction, as opportunity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything Detective Morrison had said. Everything the lawyer had explained, all the ways this could go wrong. A soft knock at my door made me sit up. "Serena, I saw your light. Are you all right?" Massimo's voice, concerned. I should have said I was fine, sent him away, maintained the boundaries. Instead, I opened the door. He stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too many thoughts." I gestured vaguely. My brain won't shut off. "Want company?" "Just to talk." He must have seen the hesitation on my face because he added quickly, "We can sit in the living room. I'll make tea. Very proper and above board." I smiled, despite everything. "Okay, tea sounds good." We ended up on opposite ends of his leather sofa, mugs of chamomile warming our hands, the city glittering beyond the windows. It reminded me of that first night, standing at these same windows, both of us carefully not discussing the electricity that hummed between us. "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work or Enrique," Massimo said. "Something just for you." I thought about it. I used to paint. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes, abstracts. I had a whole setup in my apartment before Henrique moved in. He said it took up too much space, so I packed it away. I haven't painted in almost 2 years. Why did you stop? He said it was a waste of time. That I wasn't very good anyway. I laughed without humor. Funny how I let him convince me of that. I used to love it. Massimo's expression was carefully neutral. I have a studio space in the building. It's just storage right now, but it has excellent light. You could set it up however you wanted. Massimo, you've already done so much. This isn't charity, Serena. It's a reminder. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You had a life before him. Interests, passions, dreams. Don't let him take those too. The words hit something deep in my chest. Because Henrique hadn't just taken my money and my safety. He'd taken parts of me, pieces I'd given up willingly to keep the peace, to make him happy, to avoid his jealousy. I want those parts back, I whispered. I want to be myself again. Then take them back, Massimo said simply. Paint. Stay up late reading. Do whatever it is that makes you feel alive. You're allowed to take up space, Cara. You're allowed to exist fully. I set down my tea, my hands trembling. Why are you doing this? All of this. You could have just let me stay in the guest room and left it at that. But you're helping with lawyers, with security, with rebuilding my life. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his own mug. Because I've watched you for 4 years, he said finally. Watched you dim yourself, make yourself smaller, accommodate someone who didn't deserve you. And I said nothing because you weren't mine to protect. But you called me that night. You chose to trust me. And I will not waste that trust. Is that all it is? I asked, my voice barely audible. Responsibility? His eyes met mine, and the intensity there stole my breath. No, Serena, it's not. The admission hung between us, heavy with meaning and implication. I should have pulled back, should have retreated to safer ground. But I was tired of being careful, of protecting everyone else's feelings while ignoring my own. What is it then? I asked. He set down his mug, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I told myself for 4 years that you were off limits, that you belonged to someone else, that my interest in you was inappropriate. And then you called me, and everything I'd been denying became impossible to ignore. Massimo. But you're vulnerable right now, he continued. You're healing from trauma. The last thing you need is me complicating things with feelings you might not share, and might not be ready for, even if you did. My heart hammered against my ribs. And if I told you I did share them, that I've been feeling this pull between us for years? His eyes darkened. Then I would tell you to take your time, to heal, to remember who you are without Henrique's shadow. And when you're ready, when you're sure, we'll talk about what this could be. It was the right answer, the respectful answer. The answer that proved everything I'd sensed about Massimo Bianchi was true. He could be patient. He could put my needs above his wants. But God, it was hard to be sensible when he was looking at me like that. I should go to bed, I said, standing on shaky legs. Try to sleep. He nodded, rising as well. Serena, for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. What you're doing, facing Henrique in court, rebuilding your life, it takes courage. I paused at the doorway. I don't feel brave. I feel angry. Anger can be productive, he said quietly. Use it. Channel it. Make him regret ever underestimating you. That night, I dreamed of courtrooms and handcuffs, of Henrique's face when he realized I'd gathered enough evidence to destroy him, of freedom that tasted like spring rain and new beginnings. When I woke, I knew what I had to do. The investigation would take months, Detective Morrison had said. But I didn't have to wait passively. I could gather my own evidence, document everything, build a case so airtight that Henrique would have no choice but to face consequences. I spent the next 3 months doing exactly that. The fraud investigator's name was Thomas Brennan, and he had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen every scam humanity could devise. He sat across from me in the conference room at Bianchi Imports, my meticulously organized evidence spread between us. "This is impressive work, Ms. Costa," he said, flipping through the timeline I'd created. Every loan application, every credit card opened in my name, every withdrawal from our joint account, all documented and cross-referenced. "You should consider a career in forensic accounting." "I just wanted to make sure there were no gaps," I replied. Nothing Henrique could exploit. 3 months since I'd filed the police report. 3 months of gathering statements, copying documents, building an unassailable case. The prosecutor had assigned Thomas to verify my claims, to determine if there was enough evidence to charge Henrique with identity theft and fraud. Based on his expression as he reviewed my work, I thought there was. "The handwriting analysis came back," Thomas said, pulling out another folder. "The signatures on these loan applications, not yours. The expert is willing to testify to that in court." Relief flooded through me. "So you believe me?" "Ms. Costa, I believed you from the first meeting. But belief isn't enough. We need proof that holds up under cross-examination, and you've provided that in spades." He closed the folder. "I'm recommending charges. Multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, forgery. This will go to the grand jury within the month." My hands shook as I processed his words. It was really happening. Henrique would face consequences. Justice, actual justice, not just my anger and hurt feelings. "What happens next?" I asked. "The grand jury will review the evidence, determine if there's probable cause. If they indict, and I think they will, Henrique will be arrested and arraigned. He'll likely make bail, but he'll be facing serious prison time if convicted." Prison. The word sat heavy in my stomach. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him, for the life he was about to lose. But then I remembered the bruises, the destroyed apartment, the $25,000 in fraudulent debt he'd saddled me with. He'd made his choices. Now he would live with the consequences. "Thank you," I said to Thomas, "for taking this seriously." He smiled wearily. "Thank you for doing my job for me. Half the cases I work, victims can't or won't gather evidence. You made this easy." After he left, I sat in the conference room, staring at the neat stacks of papers I'd organized. 3 months of my life condensed into evidence folders. 3 months of healing, of therapy sessions with Dr. Reeves, of slowly learning to trust my own judgment again. 3 months of Massimo maintaining respectful distance while somehow becoming the steadiest presence in my life. A soft knock at the door announced his arrival. Thomas looked pleased, Massimo observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Good news?" "He's recommending charges, grand jury within the month." I looked up at him. "It's really happening." He crossed to me, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder, a careful touch that sent warmth radiating through me. "You did this, Serena. You fought back. I'm proud of you." The simple words made my eyes burn. When had anyone last told me they were proud of me? Henrique certainly never had. It had always been criticism disguised as concern, complaints masked as care. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said truthfully. "The lawyer, the security, the place to stay while I figured everything out." "The work was yours," Massimo insisted. "I just provided resources. Your courage, your determination, that was all you." I stood, needing to move, to process the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "I've been thinking about what comes next. After the trial, after everything is settled." His hand dropped from my shoulder, giving me space. And I think I need to leave. The words hurt to say, but they felt necessary. Not the company, not the city, just your penthouse. I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own. Something flickered in his expression, there and gone too quickly to read. You don't have to prove anything, Kara. I do, though, to myself if no one else. I turned to face him fully. Living with you, it's been wonderful. Safe. But I can't rebuild my independence while depending on yours. Does that make sense? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. Yes, he said finally. It makes perfect sense. When were you thinking? After the trial. Once Henrique is dealt with and I know he can't hurt me anymore. I took a breath. I found a place, a 1-bedroom in Westbrook near the park. It's small, affordable, mine. You've already signed a lease? There was something careful in his voice. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Make sure you understood that this isn't about you. About us. It's about me needing to stand on my own feet. Massimo moved closer, his hand reaching up to cup my cheek, the first truly intimate touch in months. Serena, I have waited 4 years. I can wait longer while you find yourself again. Take your apartment. Build your life. I'm not going anywhere. The certainty in his voice, the promise implicit in his words, made my breath catch. And when I'm ready, when I've proven I can be independent? His thumb brushed my cheekbone, gentle and devastating. Then we'll see what this could be, without the shadow of Henrique, without the power imbalance of employer and employee, just Massimo and Serena, figuring out if what we feel is real. I leaned into his touch, letting myself have this moment of weakness. It feels real. I know, Kara. But I want you to be sure. I want you to choose me not because I rescued you, but because you want me. All of me, including the parts that aren't safe or respectable. The reminder of who he was, what he did, should have given me pause. But I'd known for 4 years. Had made peace with the fact that Massimo Bianchi operated in shadows, that his empire was built on things I chose not to examine too closely. I'm not naive anymore, I said. I know exactly who you are, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. His smile was slow, devastating. Then finish what you started. Put Enrique behind bars, take your apartment, rebuild your life. And when you're ready, truly ready, come back to me. The kiss he pressed to my forehead was chaste, reverent, a promise of things to come. Then he stepped back, that careful distance reasserting itself. I have a meeting, he said, his voice rougher than usual. But Serena, whatever you need while you transition to the new place, it's yours. Movers, furniture, whatever makes you comfortable. I can handle it, I protested automatically. His smile was knowing. I know you can, but you don't have to. Let me help, even if it's just hiring the movers so you don't have to carry boxes down 3 flights of stairs. I laughed despite everything. Okay, movers I'll accept. The grand jury indicted Henrique 2 weeks later. 4 counts of identity theft, 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of forgery. His bail was set at $50,000, which his parents paid, their disappointment evident in the brief glimpse I caught of them leaving the courthouse. He was ordered to stay away from me, to surrender his passport, to check in weekly with his bail supervisor. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks out. I signed the lease on my Westbrook apartment the same day. Moving day arrived with autumn colors painting the trees and a crisp edge to the air that promised winter. True to his word, Massimo had arranged movers, professionals who handled my few possessions with care. The apartment was small but bright, with windows that looked out over the park and hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly under my feet. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. "It's perfect," I told Elena, Massimo's housekeeper, who had insisted on helping me unpack. "Small, but mine." She smiled, her weathered hands folding my clothes with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Bianchi asked me to stock your kitchen. I hope you don't mind. Basic supplies, coffee, bread, some vegetables." I should have protested, should have insisted on doing it myself. But the thought of coming home to a stocked kitchen, of not having to grocery shop on my first night, was too appealing. "Thank you, Elena. That's very kind." She paused in her folding, looking at me with eyes that had seen decades of Bianchi family business. "He's a good man, Serena, underneath all the rest. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." "I know he is," I said softly. That night, alone in my new apartment for the first time, I painted. Watercolors, just like I used to, letting the colors bleed and blend on paper. Abstract landscapes that were more feeling than form. It felt like coming home to myself. The trial began on a gray October morning. I sat in the witness box, my voice steady as I outlined Enrique's systematic destruction of my financial life. The prosecutor walked me through each piece of evidence, each loan application, each forged signature. Enrique's lawyer tried to shake me on cross-examination, suggesting I'd authorized the applications and was now lying to escape the debt. But I didn't waver. The evidence was ironclad, the handwriting analysis unimpeachable. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Enrique's face crumpled as the verdict was read, his mother sobbing in the gallery. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just a quiet relief that it was over. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month, but the prosecutor told me to expect significant prison time, 5 to 10 years, possibly more given the multiple counts. I walked out of the courthouse into cold autumn sunlight, free in a way I hadn't been in years. Massimo was waiting by his car, his expression carefully neutral until he saw my face. Then he smiled, genuine and warm. "It's over," I told him. "No, Cara," he said gently. "It's just beginning." 6 months passed in a blur of therapy sessions, painting classes, and the slow reconstruction of my life. Dr. Reeves helped me untangle the threads of trauma and control, helped me understand how I'd lost myself in Enrique's jealousy and manipulation. "You're not responsible for his choices," she reminded me during one session. "Not the fraud, not the violence, none of it. Those were his actions, his decisions." Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, it took longer to believe it. The fraud charges had left me with damaged credit, but the court had ruled the debts invalid, obtained through illegal means. Slowly, my credit report began to recover, the fraudulent accounts marked as disputed, and eventually removed. I threw myself into work, taking on additional responsibilities at Bianchi Imports. Massimo had been true to his word, maintaining professional distance at the office while somehow remaining the person I most wanted to talk to about everything. We had coffee together most mornings, a habit that had started during my recovery and continued even after I moved out. 30 minutes of neutral territory, of conversation about books and current events and everything, except the tension that hummed between us. "You're doing well," he observed one morning, 3 months after the trial. "The promotion suits you." I'd been made senior operations manager, a role that came with better pay and actual authority. It felt good to be valued for my competence rather than tolerated as Enrique had made me feel. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, sipping my cappuccino. "I know you could have hired externally." "Why would I, when the best candidate was already here?" His smile was slight but genuine. "You've always been underutilized, Serena. I'm just correcting an oversight." The compliment warmed me more than the coffee. In Enrique's shadow, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as capable, intelligent, worthy of advancement. I'm thinking about taking a vacation, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Somewhere warm. Maybe the Caribbean. Massimo's eyebrow lifted. Alone? Yes, alone. I laughed at his expression. I've never traveled by myself. Henrique always insisted we go together, and then he'd complain the whole time about the expense or the crowds or something. I want to see what it's like to just be somewhere without having to accommodate anyone else's mood. That sounds healthy, he said, and I heard the approval in his voice. Where are you thinking? Aruba, maybe, or Saint. Lucia. Somewhere with beaches and good watercolors light. I'd been painting more, had even sold a few pieces at a local gallery. Small victories, but mine. We talked about travel, about places he'd been and places I wanted to go. Easy conversation, the kind that felt like breathing. It was only as I was leaving that he caught my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Serena, I'm proud of you, for building this life, for taking time to heal, for not rushing into anything before you're ready. I squeezed his hand, letting myself acknowledge what was growing between us. I'm almost ready, Massimo. Not quite, but almost. His eyes darkened with promise. I'll be here when you are. I booked the trip to Aruba for 2 weeks later. 10 days of sun and sand and painting by the ocean, of reading books without interruption, of remembering what it felt like to just exist without hypervigilance. On my last night, sitting on the beach watching the sunset, I realized I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. Not just the absence of fear, but the presence of joy. I texted Massimo a photo of the sunset. His response came quickly. Beautiful, like the artist. I smiled, something warm unfurling in my chest. I missed him, I realized. Missed our morning coffees, missed his quiet presence, missed the way he looked at me like I was precious. But I also knew I needed to finish this journey on my own terms, to come to him whole rather than broken, choosing rather than escaping. When I returned to work the following week, tanned and relaxed, I found flowers on my desk. Not roses, but wildflowers, a riot of color that made me think of my paintings. The card read simply, "Welcome home. M." My heart clenched with affection, and something deeper, something I was finally ready to name. That evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, taking inventory. The bruises had faded months ago, leaving no physical evidence of Henrique's violence. My face looked different too, more color in my cheeks, more light in my eyes. I looked like myself again, or perhaps like the person I'd always been meant to be. I pulled out my phone, typed a message to Massimo, then deleted it, then typed it again, deleted it again. Finally, I settled on, "Coffee tomorrow morning? I have something I want to discuss." His response was immediate. "My office, 8 a.m. I didn't sleep well that night, nerves and anticipation keeping me awake. But when morning came, I dressed carefully, not in the severe professional clothes I usually wore, but in a dress the color of sapphires, one I'd bought on impulse in Aruba. Massimo's expression when I entered his office told me he noticed. "Serena," he said, rising from behind his desk. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I closed the door behind me, suddenly nervous. "I wanted to talk to you about something." He gestured to the sitting area, 2 leather chairs positioned by the windows overlooking the city. We'd had countless conversations here over the years, about work, about strategy, about everything except what mattered most. "I've been thinking," I began, then paused, gathering courage. "About what you said, about waiting until I was ready." His expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. "And? I'm ready." The words came out quieter than I'd intended. "I've spent 6 months rebuilding my life, proving I can stand on my own. I've healed as much as anyone really heals from trauma, And I've realized something. What's that? His voice was rough. That I don't want to stand alone anymore. Not because I can't, but because I choose not to. I met his eyes, letting him see everything I felt. I choose you, Massimo. Not as my boss, not as my rescuer, but as the man I've been falling for since long before I admitted it to myself. He was across the space between us in a heartbeat, his hands cupping my face with devastating gentleness. Serena, are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I'm not Henrique. I won't let you go easily. I don't want easy, I whispered. I want real. I want you. His kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected. Gentle at first, almost reverent, then deepening with 4 years of restrained want. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt, finally allowing myself to feel everything I'd been denying. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I've wanted to do that for so long, he murmured. Why didn't you? I asked, breathless. Because you deserved to be chosen, not claimed. Because I needed you to come to me freely, without obligation or gratitude clouding your judgment. He pulled back slightly, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. Because I'm in love with you, Serena Costa, and I needed you to love me back, not the idea of safety I represented. Tears pricked my eyes. I do love you. That's what I've realized these past months. That what I feel for you is nothing like what I felt for Henrique. This is clear-eyed and certain. This is choice. His smile was devastating. Then choose me, Kara. Every day. Let me choose you back. What does that look like? I asked. Us, together. Given who you are and what you do. His expression grew serious. It looks like honesty. No secrets about my business, even the parts that aren't pretty. It looks like protection, not because you're weak, but because you're precious to me. It looks like partnership, because I need someone who challenges me, who sees me clearly and loves me anyway. I can do that, I said softly. All of it. He kissed me again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. When we finally separated, I was flushed and breathless, my lipstick thoroughly destroyed. What about work? I asked practically. The office will talk. Let them, Massimo said, unconcerned. You've earned your position through competence, not favoritism. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. I laughed despite everything. So possessive. You have no idea, he murmured against my temple. 4 years of watching you, wanting you, keeping my distance. Now that I have you, I'm never letting go. The words should have frightened me, echoes of Henrique's controlling jealousy. But coming from Massimo, they felt different. Not a cage, but a promise. Not possession, but devotion. Good, I said, surprising us both, because I'm not planning to go anywhere. We stood there in the morning light, the city waking up below us, finally allowing ourselves to be what we'd always been meant to be. Together. The months that followed our confession were a revelation. Dating Massimo was nothing like being with Henrique had been. Where Henrique had demanded constant reassurance, Massimo was secure in himself and in us. Where Henrique had isolated me, Massimo encouraged me to maintain friendships, to spend time with my sister when she visited, to have my own life alongside our shared one. I fell in love with the woman you are, he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in his penthouse. I'd kept my apartment, insisted on it, though I spent more nights at his place than mine. I'm not interested in changing you into someone else. The difference was stark, liberating. I flourished under his attention rather than wilting. My painting progressed from hobby to genuine pursuit, with a small showing at a local gallery scheduled for spring. My work at Bianchi Imports continued to challenge and fulfill me, the promotion allowing me to implement changes I'd been considering for years. But there were complications too. The nature of Massimo's business, the shadows he operated in, occasionally intruded on our carefully constructed normal. Like the night Dante interrupted our dinner with urgent news about a shipment that had been intercepted. Massimo had excused himself, his expression going cold and controlled, the businessman replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "I'm sorry," he'd said when he returned an hour later. "This is the part I can't change, Kara. Sometimes business requires immediate attention." "I know," I'd replied, and I did. I'd chosen him with clear eyes, accepting all the parts of who he was. Just come back safe. His smile had been soft, surprised. Always. We discussed the future in careful terms. Marriage, eventually, though we were both comfortable taking our time. Children, perhaps, though I wanted to be certain of my own stability first. Building a life together that honored both our independence and our commitment. It was 3 months after Henrique's sentencing, 8 months after our first kiss, that everything crystallized. I woke in Massimo's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, his arm draped over my waist. Contentment settled over me like a warm blanket. This was what love should feel like, I thought. Safe, chosen, real. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. "Serena Costa? This is Deputy Marshal Richards. Henrique Silva has escaped from custody. Please contact us immediately." I sat up, my sudden movement waking Massimo. "What's wrong?" he asked, instantly alert. I showed him the message, my hands trembling. Henrique had been serving his sentence at a minimum security facility, the fraud charges not warranting high security imprisonment. Apparently, that had been a mistake. Massimo was on his phone immediately, calling Dante, calling his contacts, activating the security protocols we'd hoped we'd never need. Within an hour, the penthouse was locked down, additional security posted, and every entrance monitored. "He won't get to you," Massimo promised, his arm around my shoulders as we sat in his study. "I swear it, Serena. He won't touch you." But the fear was corrosive, eating away at the peace I'd built. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow could be Henrique. The freedom I'd fought so hard for felt suddenly fragile, threatened. "I won't let him make me a victim again," I said, my voice fierce despite my shaking hands. "I won't go back to being afraid." Deputy Marshal Richards arrived that afternoon, a professional woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "We have every reason to believe Silva will attempt contact," she warned. "His obsession with you was noted throughout his incarceration. He made threats against you, against Mr. Bianchi. We take this seriously." "What are our options?" Massimo asked, his hand finding mine, anchoring me. "Protective custody for Ms. Costa, ideally, until Silva is recaptured." "No," I said immediately. "I'm not hiding again. I'm not letting him control my life." "Serena," Massimo began. "No," I repeated more firmly. "I spent 3 years accommodating Henrique's jealousy, his control. I spent months rebuilding my life after escaping him. I'm not going into hiding now. We deal with this, but on my terms." Deputy Richards looked between us. "Ms. Costa, I understand your desire for autonomy, but this is a dangerous situation." "Then, make it less dangerous," I countered. "Increase security, monitor my movements, whatever you need to do. But I'm not disappearing. I have a job, a life, people who depend on me. Henrique doesn't get to take that away." After Richards left, Massimo pulled me close. "You're sure about this?" "Yes." I lifted my chin, meeting his eyes. "I survived him once. I'll survive him again. But I won't do it by running." His smile was fierce with pride. "Then we stand and fight. Together." The days that followed were tense. Henrique remained at large despite a multi-state manhunt. Security became my shadow. Dante or one of Massimo's other men always present but discreet. I went to work, maintained my routines, refused to let fear dictate my choices. It was a week after the escape when I received the first call. I didn't recognize the number, answered automatically while reviewing inventory reports at my desk. Serena. Henrique's voice, the sound of it making my skin crawl. I should have hung up. Should have called for Dante. Instead, I found my voice, cold and controlled. What do you want, Henrique? I want what's mine, he said, and I could hear the familiar edge of jealousy beneath his words. You. Us. The life you stole from me. I didn't steal anything. You destroyed it yourself. Because of him. Henrique's voice rose, cracking. Because of Massimo Bianchi. You were mine, Serena. Mine. And he took you. No, I said firmly. I left you because you hurt me. Because you stole from me. Lied to me. Hit me. Massimo had nothing to do with that. Those were your choices. I made mistakes, Henrique admitted, his tone shifting to the pleading one I remembered. But we can fix this. You can drop the charges, tell them you lied, that you wanted the loans. We can start over, Serena. Somewhere new. Just us. The delusion in his voice was almost sad. Did he really believe I would go back? That anything he said could undo what he'd done? I'm not dropping anything, I said quietly. You need to turn yourself in, Henrique. Face the consequences of your actions. That's the only way this ends. It ends when you come back to me. His voice turned vicious. I know where you work, where you live. I know you're with him, that you're sleeping in his bed. You think that doesn't make me crazy? You think I'll just accept that? What you accept or don't accept is not my problem anymore, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm done with you, Henrique. Completely done. Turn yourself in or don't. But leave me alone. I ended the call, my hands shaking. Dante was at my door instantly, having heard the raised voices. He called, I said, giving him the phone. You'll want to trace it. The marshals arrived within the hour. The call had been traced to a burner phone somewhere in the city. Henrique was close, watching, waiting for an opportunity. We need to move you, Deputy Richards insisted. This is escalating. No, Massimo said, before I could respond. His voice was cold, controlled, the voice of a man who had made difficult decisions before. Serena stays visible, but protected. If Henrique wants to make contact, let him. But on our terms, not his. Richards looked between us. Mr. Bianchi, I can't authorize using a civilian as bait. You're not authorizing it, I am. He turned to me, his expression softening. If you're willing, Kara, no pressure. We can do this the safe way if you prefer. I thought about it. About Henrique out there, obsessing over me, planning God knows what. About the fear that had colored my life for years, first with him, then after leaving him. I'm willing, I said. Let's end this. The plan was simple, perhaps too simple. I would maintain my normal routine, but with heavy security presence. Henrique would see me, would try to make contact, and when he did, law enforcement would be ready. It took 3 days. I was leaving work, walking to the parking garage with Dante several steps behind, when I heard my name. Serena, wait. Please. Henrique stepped from behind a pillar, looking gaunt and desperate. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging off his frame, his eyes wild with something that might have been madness or desperation or both. Don't come any closer, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just want to talk, he pleaded. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I ask. You don't get to ask for anything from me, I replied. Behind him, I could see plainclothes officers moving into position. You had years of chances, Henrique. You used them all up when you decided stealing and violence were acceptable. I was sick, he insisted. Jealous and sick, and I couldn't think straight. But I'm better now. I can be better. We can be better together. No, we can't, I said firmly, because there is no we. There hasn't been for a long time. I don't love you, Henrique. I'm not sure I ever really did. What I loved was the person I thought you were, before I knew what you were capable of. His face contorted with rage. You're with him. Bianchi. You're fucking him, aren't you? After everything, after you accused me of being paranoid, you were thinking about him the whole time. I wasn't, I said truthfully. But I am now. And Henrique? He's everything you never were. He respects me, trusts me, lets me be myself. He doesn't need to control me because he's secure enough to let me choose him every day. It was the wrong thing to say. I saw it in the way Henrique's expression twisted, in the sudden movement of his hand toward his pocket. Everything happened very fast after that. Dante was on him before he could fully draw whatever weapon he'd brought. Officers swarmed in. Henrique wrestled to the ground, handcuffed, still screaming my name. Massimo appeared, having been stationed in a nearby car, pulling me away from the chaos, his arms solid and safe around me. It's over, he murmured against my hair. It's finally over, Cara. And it was. Henrique was back in custody, this time headed to a maximum security facility. The charges from the escape added years to his sentence. He would be old when he finally got out, and I would be long gone, living a life he could never touch. That night, back at the penthouse with the security protocols stood down, I stood at the windows where I'd stood so many times before. Massimo came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Free," I said, and meant it. Actually, truly free. Not just away from him, but free of fear, of doubt, of any lingering question about whether I made the right choice. And what choice is that? His voice was soft, knowing, but wanting to hear it anyway. I turned in his arms, looking up into those dark eyes that had seen me at my worst, and loved me anyway. You, Massimo. I choose you. Every day, every moment, for the rest of my life if you'll have me. His smile was slow, devastating. Is that a proposal, Ms. Costa? Maybe, I replied, suddenly nervous. If you're interested. He kissed me then, deep and thorough, a promise and a claiming all at once. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm very interested, he murmured, but first, there's something I need to do. He pulled away, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small velvet box. When he opened it, I gasped. The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the color of the dress I'd worn the day I'd finally chosen him. Serena Costa, he said, dropping to one knee right there in his living room with the city glittering below us. I have loved you for 4 years, watched you, wanted you, waited for you. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you chose well? Tears streamed down my face, happy tears for the first time in so long. Yes, I whispered. Yes, Massimo. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me down into his arms, both of us laughing and crying and holding each other like we'd never let go. Later, much later, as we lay tangled in his sheets, my ring catching the moonlight, I traced patterns on his chest. Thank you, I said softly. For what, Cara? For waiting, for seeing me, for letting me find myself before finding us. His arms tightened around me. Thank you for calling me that night, for trusting me when you were terrified, for choosing to heal rather than hide, for choosing me when you could have chosen safety. You are my safety, I corrected. But you're also my passion, my partnership, my future. You're everything, Massimo. He kissed the top of my head, his voice rough with emotion. And you, Serena Costa, soon to be Serena Bianchi, are my heart, my home, my choice, every day, for the rest of my life. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. But inside, in the safety of Massimo's arms, I had finally found peace. Not the peace of absence, of things not happening, but the peace of presence, of choosing love, of building a future on the solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership. Henrique had tried to break me. Instead, he'd forged me into someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again settle for anything less than she deserved. And what I deserved, what I had chosen, was love. Real, honest, complicated, beautiful love with a man who saw all of me and stayed anyway. The ending, as it turned out, was just the beginning.